Okay, in this video we're going to talk about how we simplify expressions, and the first tool that anybody ever, thinks about using when they're simplifying an expression is the idea of using the order of operations. A quick little refresher on order of operations. PEMDAS, as some people like to call it. We go through our order of operations in 4 sequential steps. First, we start with parentheses and other grouping symbols and do everything that's inside of a grouping symbol before we get rid of that grouping symbol. And when we do parentheses or grouping symbols, if we have multiple grouping symbols, we always work from the inside out. And you'll see what I mean by that in some later examples, but basically just go to the innermost grouping symbol, evaluate what's going on there, and then move on forward. And there are all kinds of different grouping symbols other than parentheses. We've got brackets, squared off brackets. We've got braces, absolute value signs. And absolute value signs are different from the first 3 that we talked about in so much as we do what's inside of those and then we apply the absolute value and take whatever the result is and make it positive. We've got radical signs. That's another grouping symbol. We do everything that's inside of the radical sign and then take the square root. Or fraction bars. If I have something here and something here with the fraction bar, that's a grouping symbol. We do everything in the numerator, we do everything in the denominator, and after we're done doing both of those, then we divide. The second step in our order of operations is to evaluate exponents or roots. And then third step is we do multiplication and division from left to right. Some people have the misconception that you do multiplication before division, and I think a lot of that is because of the mnemonic device, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. People think multiplication comes before division, but those actually happen at the same level from left to right. And the reason why they happen at the same level is in reality, multiplication and division are the same thing. Dividing by 1/2 or by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Those two things are absolutely identical in how they behave. And so it doesn't make sense if we would do one first over the other when in reality they're the same thing. Same idea applies to addition and subtraction. We do all our addition and subtraction from left to right. Again, addition does not come before subtraction. They're on the same level. And you can kind of reason through that because, again, addition and subtraction are really at their fundamental basis the same idea. Subtracting 5 is the same thing as adding a -5. And so those two operations are really identical, and so they operate on the same level of our order of operations. All right, let's apply the order of operations. In example A, the first thing that I'm going to do, I have some grouping symbols, so I'm going to do what's inside the grouping symbols first. And 9 minus 7 gives me 2. Okay, and then the next thing in my order of operations is exponent, so I'm going to apply the exponent to 2 squared, and 2 squared is 4. Now since I had these parentheses here, there was an implied multiplication, we're going to put back in there when we get rid of the parentheses, and now I do multiplication and division from left to right, so I only have one multiplication, I can go ahead and do that, and then I do my addition and subtraction. All right, example B, 45 divided by 5 times 3. I've got division, I've got multiplication. Which do I do first? Well, they're on the same level, so I do them from left to right. So 45 divided by 5 is what I'm going to do first. And then 9 times 3. And this works out to be 27. All right, this last one looks like a doozy. We have multiple grouping symbols here. So since we have multiple grouping symbols, we're going to work from the inside out. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the innermost set of grouping symbols, which are these parentheses that contain the 3 squared plus 1. So we're going to go ahead and do what's inside of those parentheses. Leave everything else alone for the time being. And we're going to do inside those parentheses, we have an exponent and we have an addition. We do the exponent first. And now we'll complete the addition inside of those parentheses. Now we have next, our next most inner grouping symbol are these brackets. So we're going to do what's inside there first. Using the order of operations, we have a subtraction and a multiplication. Multiplication comes before subtraction. So we're going to go ahead and do the multiplication first. 4 times 10 is 40. And then we'll finish off what's inside the brackets. (32 minus 40) gives me -8. And now, to my last set of grouping symbols. I'm going to follow the order of operations in there. I have an exponent, I have subtraction, I have multiplication. The exponent comes first. 7 squared is 49. And then the multiplication comes next. So we've got 49 minus 4 times -8, so that's minus a -32, which we can think of as a plus 32. And then I do my addition. And lastly, I get rid of that last grouping symbol, and we end up with 162. All right. Absolute value symbols are a very common grouping symbol that we see, and they're very commonly misused by people. If you think about them as a grouping symbol and approach them just like you would if you had parentheses, you do everything inside that grouping symbol before you do anything else, following the order of operations. So in this first one, we have an exponent. We're going to evaluate that. And now all we have left in there is addition and subtraction. We're going to go ahead and do the addition and subtraction from left to right. 4 minus 9 gives us -5. -5 plus 2 gives us -3. And now, unlike if these were just parentheses, since they are absolute values, we're going to take whatever we get in the end, and we're going to turn it into a positive. So that ends up being 3. Second one here, following the order of operations, we've got a lot of addition and subtraction. We've got one multiplication. We're going to do that multiplication first. And then I want to do addition and subtraction from left to right. 7 minus 16 is -9. -9 plus 6 is -3. -3 minus 8 is -11, and the absolute value of -11 is +11. All right, on to the last one. We want to do what's inside our grouping symbols first, so again, we start by attacking the absolute value sign. We've got a couple multiplications and a subtraction. We'll do the multiplications from left to right. 5 times 7 is 35. 8 times 6 is 48. Now we'll go ahead and do the subtraction in there. And now we'll use the absolute value. The absolute value of -13 gives us +13. And then 5 minus 13 gives us our final answer. All right, one more here. Now here we have multiple sets of absolute value signs. So just like before with grouping symbols, we want to work first on the innermost grouping symbol. So we're going to go ahead and do what's inside those absolute values. That absolute value first. And then we'll take the absolute value. That turns into a +3. And now we can do addition and subtraction from left to right. And then we evaluate the absolute value again after we're done doing all that work inside the grouping symbols, and we end up with 1. Fraction bars are another kind of grouping symbol. We want to make sure we do everything in the numerator and everything in the denominator. And then once we've done that, then we'll actually divide out the fraction. So our first step in the numerator is an exponent, 2 to the 4th, which is going to be 16. Sorry about that, had a phone call. And we'll do the division first in the denominator, 15 divided by 5. And now we'll work our way through. Looking at the numerator again, we've got a multiplication and an addition. We do the multiplication first. In the denominator, all we have left is that subtraction. We'll go ahead and do that. And now in the numerator, we'll add. And now after we're done doing everything in the numerator and the denominator, now we can divide this out. 40 divided by 2 gives us 20. All right, last one. First we start inside the absolute value symbol. And we apply the exponent in there. And in the denominator, we'll go ahead and do the multiplications. 4 times 2 gives us 8. 5 times 3 gives us 15. Back to the numerator, we continue with the absolute value symbols. And in the denominator, we'll add. And then we take the absolute value. Isn't very exciting. The absolute value of 11 is 11. And now we'll multiply. And we'll add. And then we'll divide out 46 divided by 23. That gives us 2. And that concludes our video on simplifying expressions.